Hi, I'm John with Rio Grande. In this video, I'm going to use the Durston rolling mill to texture a few pieces of metal, and then I'm going to take those pieces of metal and I'm going to form it with the Bonny Doon hydraulic press. I'm going to show you the advantages of using these two pieces of equipment together. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so let's go ahead and start with a texture plate. So this is it's a commercially available texture plate. This texture plate is made by Bonny Doon. It's made from a special steel that will not harm your rollers. This is not your normal average cold rolled or hot rolled steel. And I've got a piece of copper here. It is 18 gauge. It's been annealed, and I've cut it to the size of the texture plate. Now I'm going to go ahead and put it into the rolling mill. I opened up the rollers until I could put the stack in between the rollers. I'm going to close them up until I can't pull the stack out. All right, and I'm going to read where it is on this wheel gauge on the top of the machine. Now I'll back it off so I can pull the stack out. I'm going to go back to that setting on the wheel gauge. And then on this particular rolling mill, I found that adding 20 units to this measurement is just about right for a perfect texture. It's going to differ between rolling mills. So this is just this particular rolling mill. So I'm going to go ahead and add my 20. And then I'm going to put the stack against the rollers and start to feed the metal through the machine. So I want to talk to you really quick about using texture plates. So these texture plates are not hardened. You're not going to be able to have a hardened texture plate and roll it through your rolling mill. They are softer than your rollers. They are harder than the metal that you're using. However, you can still damage these plates. I always recommend to utilize a sheet of metal that is the same size as the plate itself. If you were to run a smaller piece, you're greatly reducing the surface area. You will definitely need to reduce the amount of pressure that you put on the plate, because with the reduction of surface area, the higher the pressure is going to be. So with this texture on this particular mill, I used 20 units, and that was just the 20 tick marks on the gauge. If I was to do that with this small of a piece of metal, I would indent the shape of the metal into this metal plate, and it would ruin this plate for future use. If you're going to use smaller pieces of metal with these plates, you're going to have to experiment to see where the maximum amount of pressure would be. So just know, I always recommend to go ahead and do a full sheet, 2 inches by 6 inches, and then you can cut down this to whatever size that you're wanting. Okay, so now that that PSA is out of the way, I went ahead, I straightened out the copper. Now I'm going to take portions of this and I'm going to make a bead that I'm going to turn into a pendant. And I'm going to do that by using the Bonny Doon silhouette die container and a Bonny Doon true shape silhouette die. I'm going to use the silhouette die itself as a template. So I'm going to select the area of this textured metal that I want to be the focal point of my bead. And then I'll lightly trace it. And then what I'll do is I'm going to cut this metal about 1/4 inch away from the edge of this shape. So I'm going to go ahead and shear this out and then anneal it. I have the metal annealed and cleaned up and loaded in the silhouette die container. I have another video that I did that goes more into detail on using the silhouette die container and the true shape dies, and we'll include the link here. I'm going to use 80 durometer urethane and now load it into the press. And there's my shape. Since the true shape dies match the Swanstrom disc cutter of the same shape, I'm going to use the Swanstrom disc cutter to cut the shape out. Now I'm going to make another one and start sanding. For the next project, I'm using 2 pieces of silver and I'm using a feather as my texture. Now there is no set amount that you need to decrease your rollers. This is all going to be practice. It's going to be something that you're going to have to experiment with to find what works. So I'm going to actually add 10 and then roll. The silver has been annealed and cleaned up, and here we go. And there's the texture. There's the texture and the feather. You can see that this is a one-shot deal. You're not going to be able to get multiple passes with an organic like this. But we do have 2 separate textures. And that's why I use 2 pieces of metal. Then I can get 2, in this case, bracelet blanks. So what I'm going to use to form the bracelet is the Bonny Doon Synclastic bracelet die set. It is 2 dies. You start off with your master die. You notice there is a line here that I've drawn on the die. I've also drawn a center line on the bracelet. This will help you keep the bracelet perfectly in center. If you start off center of the bracelet die with your bracelet will twist and it'll have a weird shape. So key to this is always be on center. Alright, and that's the initial shape. Now I switched out to the smaller die and I'm going to bring these ends in. After a little oxidation and a polishing to knock off the high spots, now we have this really delicate design that was untouched by forming with the Bonny Doon and using urethane. So now I'm going to show you some of the process that I use to make this little box. And I start with a texture on a 6x2 piece of copper, and also the same texture down the middle of a 3x3 piece of copper. To form the lid on the box, I'm going to use the Bonny Doon 3-inch silhouette die forming box. And the first step in doing this is to create some silhouette dies out of cast acrylic. Okay, now that I have my cast acrylic silhouette dies made, you notice that I did make 2 of them, and that is because the lid itself is actually going to stand higher than the thickness of the cast acrylic. So that's why I made 2. The bottom piece is not an exact match to the top piece. It's actually about a millimeter or maybe a little bit more smaller, because I want full support of this top die. So what I want to do is I'm going to align my texture with the die. Remember, the texture is only in the center of this sheet. So I'm going to align the texture so that the shape falls within that texture properly. And let's put a piece of tape on here. Now I'm going to put that down into the box. Then I'm using 80 durometer urethane. That goes in. I'm going to use some cast acrylic spacers and then the pusher. Then into the press. All right. And there is my puffed form for the lid of my box. And the texture is untouched. So to finish the box out, I made a frame for the bottom. I added these uprights just to frame out the sides. And for the lid, I created a frame with an inside lip that the top rests against and then acts as the lip that goes over the top of the box. And these are just a few examples of the things that you can do utilizing the Durston rolling mill to apply texture to your metal and the Bonny Doon to form that metal without damaging the texture. So I hope that you found the information in this video helpful, and I hope that I gave you a little bit of inspiration that you can use in your work. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comments below. That will do it for this video. We'll see you next time. Take care.